Just 3 albums released in 40 years, yet each has had a seismic impact. One heralded as a masterpiece, possibly the greatest album of the 90s. This is the story of My Bloody Valentine and the mastermind behind the music, Kevin Shields. That's coming up next on Booked on Rock.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. We've got a first-time guest on the podcast. It is Andrew Pear. His brand new book is titled Turn My Head into Sound, A History of Kevin Shields and My Bloody Valentine. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate having me.
My Bloody Valentine released just 3 albums, yet each has made such an impact. Their 1991 album, Loveless, considered by some to be the best album of the 90s. When did you first hear of My Bloody Valentine? When did you become a fan?
I heard them when they put out their first important record when I was 16. So it hit right at that key moment in your life when music's kind of important. So so I was there from the beginning, and so I've been following them since I'm about 52 now. So I was following them this whole time pretty closely.
You provide a history of shoegaze music in the book, so they are under that category of shoegaze music. So I'm sure there's somebody listening now saying, what is shoegaze music?
Yeah, it's really funny. It's they kind of inspired these other bands to take up the guitar and get excited, and yet what they were doing has nothing in common with these bands. So they kind of got grouped together, lumped together, and this category was made. And there was something to these initial bands that they were inspired in My Bloody Valentine, but they did the exact opposite things that My Bloody Valentine did in the studio. Truly the opposite. And so it was this strange thing to him that they were being compared to them.
That name, shoegaze, these bands oftentimes when you'd see them in concert, they're staring down at maybe like the
pedals,
the effects pedals.
Or looking, they're not dynamic bands necessarily. Yeah. So they're looking away, and My Bloody Valentine and Kevin Shields is not a real dynamic character on stage.
Yeah.
And nor is some of the other bands. And it was first meant as a derogatory thing, but it took off for some reason. Instead of like dream pop or something else or whatever, it became shoegaze. And it come to define, it's really a strange category because it's so broad. People put anything into it almost. But there was an initial group of bands right after their first album, the first major album came out, Isn't Anything. There were bands inspired by them like 2 years later. That was the first generation of shoegaze, like Slow Dive and Bride and Lush and some of these other bands around then. And then they went off and did their own things, but they were seen as, a lot of people got excited about the guitar again because of him. And a whole bunch of British bands came about, British guitar bands, new generation.
And Kevin Shields is the main guy, and that shoegaze label never sat well with him.
No, it's just nothing, they're using stuff from the 70s that hasn't changed, like stuff the Beatles and Hendrix pioneered, like echo, flanging, phasing, reverb. He doesn't use that. That stuff that's called modulation typically, and it hasn't really changed since 1970. So he doesn't use that. He has a totally different, and it's kind of very top down. Top down. You can't interact with it really. It's not that emotive or anything. And what he does is a totally different thing. He doesn't do any one thing now, but for a while he played this thing called glide guitar. They kind of called it. And there was this way you used the tremolo arm with some different effects, and very emotive. And Johnny Marr of the Smiths was a fan, and Brian Eno and Patti Smith, and anyone you want to name is it was like the guy from Garbage who produced Nirvana's album Nevermind, and Billy Corgan's a huge fan, and so they all think he's like the most interesting guitar player.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned Billy Corgan. That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I hear the influence. I hear the My Bloody Valentine influence in the Smashing Pumpkins, particularly Siamese Dream.
Yeah, there's a quote, and he's like, "Don't ask me about this stuff. The only person doing anything original is Kevin Shields." I took this stuff from Kevin Shields, something like that. And another band, Boo Radleys, they're big in England, and what's the guy's name from Garbage, the drummer who produced Nevermind? He was saying how they're hallucinatory, the tones and textures and everything. And there's some videos on, there's 4 pretty good videos on YouTube that'll give you some idea. They're kind of analogs to the songs, but you can't hear them properly on a computer or anything. It's best he really cares about the fidelity and stuff, so you want to hear it on a proper stereo some way if you can. But they give you some idea of what is going on, that it's pretty psychedelic and out there.
Yeah. Butch Vig is what you're
Butch
thinking.
Vig, there you go. Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But Kevin Shields, he's an indie rock icon, but he's relatively obscure among the mainstream music fans.
Yeah. I mean, all the people in bands know him, all the engineers, all the critics, all the other people know him. When there was a poll in Ireland for like the best Irish album the last, 50 years, 100 years, whatever, or of all time, maybe, Loveless won easily, beating out everything by U2, by the Cranberries, by Enya, by Sinead O'Connor. Easily won the contest. Like the best album from 1991, Loveless, which is like his Everything Came Together Perfectly. It's their his revolver album, if you want to call it that, the Beatles analogy or something. And I think it beat like Octung Baby 2-1. And Octung Baby was inspired a lot by their previous album. But this one was more expensive sounding, Loveless. So, I mean, that was a poll among people who are publicists, critics, journalists, all industry people. So in Ireland, and it's not particularly Irish sounding. He grew up he spent 10 years in America, 10 years in Ireland, and 10 years in London by the time he'd done that album.
Yeah, let's talk. He's of Irish descent, but he was born and raised in Queens, New York.
Yeah, the first year. So there was a big unemployment problem in the 50s in Ireland. So a bunch of them left the country, and his parents came here. A bunch of other Irish emigres, and so he was raised here the first 10 years. Then he has 4 brothers and sisters who are all distinguished themselves in other ways, and they moved back when he was 10, but he picked up on all the American stuff. Like he saw the Jacksons cartoons and the Partridge Family and the Beatles cartoons and all the music stuff. And he was doing musical experiments even at a really young age. And then when he got to Dublin, he got, by the time he was 15 or 16, he had his first guitar. He was playing in bands and stuff. And then they, then his, by the time he was like 20, I guess they left Ireland to find their way.
But as far back as you said, when he was a kid, he was 11 years old when he did something with the sound of a vacuum cleaner.
He was like taping, he was doing these experiments with like his like 10, 11, I think, yeah, right. And he was taking a sound and putting it on, one tape recorder and re-recording another tape recorder and going back and forth and doing the kind of experiments you see people doing at universities and stuff like that, with learning about how sounds decay and all that kind of stuff. And
the warbly sound of the television.
Oh yeah, there's a clip of Hendrix playing at Woodstock. He liked playing maybe it was the national anthem, and it was real warped, and he really liked that. And then when we heard the actual thing, it wasn't as warped, but this copy he had and some of the tape copies are really warped. And he likes the idea of like this is an Eastern idea of music too, not exact tones everywhere, going in between, blue notes and stuff like that. And that's in his guitar playing. He goes out of tune a lot, but then comes back in. So it's disorienting a little bit, but it always comes back. So you're back, you're oriented again. But he blurs all these things together to make a really neat composite sound.
Yeah, blurs it and bends sounds. And we're talking about, again, 11 years old. I mean, I hate to throw the word genius around, but I don't know, man. 11 years old, you're starting to think about those things.
Yeah, the word genius gets thrown around, and if you hear about the experiments he did and in the studio, and just Alan McGee, who started Creation Records, which the label Oasis was on, for example, and Primal Scream and some other British bands. He just said straight up he was a genius. He thought he was like one of the best A&R men of his generation, and he's just straight up, this guy's a genius. But he's maddening and difficult because he doesn't have that much control over himself. He doesn't mean to be, but he's not the most productive guy in some ways. He's had some issues, as we all do.
Sure. How does the band form My Bloody Valentine? This is when he moves back to Ireland. That eventually leads to the formation of My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah, there's a first iteration of with a different singer named Dave Conway. And so he first joins up with the drummer who's been in the band the whole time and is his partner in crime, Colm Kozik, I guess, or Kuzik or something. And so they meet at like 16 or 17. And he's been in that, two of them have been together the whole time, pretty much. And they get a singer named Dave Conway, and in about 84 they get advice from this other band they really respect to leave Dublin, and they felt like they didn't fit in there, that anyone who does anything too different, it's like you're shunned. You can't do anything too radical there. And this was a different time and place. This is the late 70s, this is the early 80s really. And the world was much more confined, and nothing like today with the internet and the world all around us so easily available. So he told them go get away from Dublin, from Ireland, and don't go to London though. So they went to the Netherlands first. It was him, Colm, the drummer, who's his good friend, Dave Conway, the singer, and Dave's girlfriend played keyboards and bass kind of on keyboards. And so the four of them went to the Netherlands first for about 4 months, and then Germany. And they had a good time. They were, it's just after the birthday party had left, which I don't know if many Americans know that well. It's Nick Cave's original band. And Germans are very open to everything. And he saw these bands doing radical things, but like taking pop songs and doing crazy things with them. And it was an inspiring time. And then they eventually end up in London after about a year in the Netherlands and Germany. And he next gets affected by, up to this point, he'd been to the Ramones and the Birthday Party and, what else? Some stuff like T-Rex and stuff like that. Probably the Birthday Party and the Cramps, kind of rockabilly kind of stuff, and gothic kind of rockabilly stuff. And then he hears the Jesus and Mary Jane in 84, 85, and they move to London. And Jesus and Mary Jane take like almost a Phil Spector type melody and simple beat and put noise on top of it. I mean, it really sounds like Be My Baby or something, but done with like harsh guitars. And he was that really blew his mind. And they had a couple of years where they couldn't figure things out. They didn't know what direction. And then Dave Conway left. Oh, they got a proper bass player. And Dave Conway left, and his girlfriend left also. And Debbie Googe joined on bass first in 85. And then 87, Belinda Butcher joins, and everything changes. Things fall into place. That's the band of now. Belinda Butcher, Kevin Shields, Colm, and Debbie.
Let's talk about the phase where they're making these mini albums. This before the lineup that became what we know in those two albums in 1991. There were some mini albums recorded and released. Shields has tried to warn fans away from listening to anything he made prior to 1987. He says he regarded it as it's a little more than juvenilia, I think was the word. But
yeah, I mean,
what are we hearing on those? How different is it from?
I mean, it's
album?
weird. The very first mini album I did, that actually did in a professional studio, and it actually got some good write-ups. And that one works. And then after that one was done in Germany. And it's a totally different sound, but it still works. It's okay. Got a good write-up or two, which I put in the book. And then they did like 3 or 4 EPs in London. And there it's just very stilted and it doesn't work and they're not happy with it and they're still learning the studio. And there's a good reason he warns people away from them. They're kind of like, they're in transition from the rockabilly to like the Jesus and Mary Jane. And they're trying to be original and they're too conceptual. And, they had like matching haircuts for a while, a la the Ramones and some other bands like that. And, they're just feeling their way out. And then Dave Conway leaves.
And why did he leave?
He just left just because the direction the band was going was a little bit more melodic. And he had thought they'd done everything they were going to do and he wanted to write. And he wasn't pushed out or anything. He chose on his own to leave.
He went on to become a pretty successful writer.
I'm not sure how big he is or anything. I've read some of his books. I think they're good, but I don't know. I think he does comics and books and it's competitive.
But he steered away from a music career. He
has nothing to do with music anymore. And I got to talk to him, and he right away he felt the outsider. He felt he had a lot in common with them as an outsider in Dublin, and so they were a real unit, the four of them, the first iteration. But then eventually he leaves in 80. When they first moved to London, his girlfriend leaves the band. She had just done it to go along. Her name's Tina Durkin. And then he leaves in early 87. And then they get another lead singer for a minute, and Belinda Butcher comes on too to sing backup. And Shields doesn't want to be the lead singer. He doesn't want the attention or have to deal with that. But
they mentioned the Smiths in their ad for a new singer, and that caused some problems.
He likes Johnny Marr, which I'm a huge fan of. Yeah. But and Morrissey's talented too, but all these Morrissey wannabes came in.
Yeah, poor Morrissey imitations is I think.
Yeah, that was like a disaster. He calls them a whole bunch of fruit balls showed up. He said, so that was not good. So they ended up just getting came down to two people, two women who they knew as friends through friends, and this guy was a lead singer for a minute who started another band called Gallon Drunk years later. And so he left after one show, and then Belinda Butcher was chosen, and she stuck around. She could sing and key perfectly, and she just natural ability, you could tell right away.
And that radically changed the band's sound.
Yeah, and there was just like, from that moment on, everything starts to fall into place. Even the stuff they do, the main body of their work really starts in 88. There's 2 releases in 87 that they kind of don't like to talk about that much, but they're not their truest sound. They're a little more twee, a little more a little more pop than they would be. They're not as true to their own sound, and but there's still some moments on there where you hear them. It's better than the sum of its parts, finally, with Belinda. And it just works, you can tell. But then so they put out these 2 things, a Strawberry Wine single and Ecstasy EP on Lazy. And they leave, and they finally get an invitation to get on Creation Records, which Jesus and Mary Jane originally were on. and they were a very small label, but they went in there they were on the verge of breaking up for a while, and because they weren't having any success. And they finally just went in there and just let they're afraid to let their influences show in a way, because they were afraid it would look like a copycat or something. But they finally let their influences show, and it became something original. They let Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. and Public Enemy and all these things go in, and that EP is their breakthrough point, because You Made Me Realize. And then from there on out, it's just been successful, except all their releases, even though they've had personal problems. The records have never let them down, what they put out.
Isn't Anything. That's the first full-length studio album. Let's get into this. There's some amazing stories in the book on this. He told the engineer, Dave Anderson, at one point to erase all the dry elements of the guitars, to leave only the processed reverse reverb signal on the tapes.
Yeah, so he figures out slowly through a couple steps. What he does up to the album Loveless anyways, is his main thing is a thing he uses the Jazz Master, which has a very unique tremolo system. And he doesn't put it in all the way. He puts a piece of tape on the end, and he puts it in kind of loosely. And so he can play with it however he wants. And it's not like a typical anyone you've seen play a tremolo arm before. And like he strums with it. And instead of people usually bend notes with it, he's like chord bending. And all their songs have just one guitar typically, even though it sounds like a guitar army. He has one main guitar in most songs. And he used reverse reverb, an iteration of it. There's different meanings for that. That's you have the initial dry attack that's recorded, and then you have the reverse reverb, and then the part that's made by the digital machine. And he heard just the digital part coming out of the speakers, and he came into the room. He's like, "What the hell is that?" He's like, the engineer was like, "Oh, that's just the digital element of it. It'll sound different when we put back the original dry attack. That's nothing." And he's like, "No, that's my sound." He's like, "That's it. That's what I want." And it's very disembodied and very strange, but he used it in such a way that mystified these other bands who tried to copy him. And he's using the tremolo arm in a different way. He's using this reverse reverb, which is a digital effect, but he tapes it through speakers, through analog speakers. So you get all kinds of breakup and phasing and weird things, because the analog world is better for distortion and breakup and all kinds of things. There's not digital distortion isn't great, or breakup. Digital things don't distort and break up well. And so he tapes everything through mics. He doesn't go right into the desk or anything. And the whole album is really diverse. Isn't Anything. It was done for no money. There's an EP that they recorded their second EP and the album at the same time. So about 20 tracks over 5 weeks, and for almost nothing. And he was just really creative because he found this new way to play guitar that no one had used before. And it just sounds, the sounds are so different on the album, on every song, but it's kind of the same setup. And everyone thought it was 10 guitars on some songs, but it's just one. But you have each string gives off its own harmonic resonance, and it's bending, and there's a certain kind of tremolo system on the Jazz Master and Jaguar guitars that's unique to them, different from a Stratocaster or whatever.
It's the mad scientist.
So I mean, the fact that he figured this out, and he knew to turn the tone down and to get the right sound, and he took a couple steps and just figured this out, and it's just it's really evocative and emotive and different. And so, all these people are fans of him, and then he's a great songwriter too. he's a sophisticated songwriter. And, I talk to my friends who know about songwriting, and he starts all his songs on just an acoustic guitar and use some weird tuning, kind of like Joni Mitchell. So he starts off with that as his basis. And you can see jazz chords like Bacharach or Brian Wilson or Antonio Carlos Jobim, Tom Jobim, really sophisticated chords. So you start with that. Then you have, he really understands the studio and can use it like no one else. And you get these recordings that are just, are otherworldly.
Yeah, I want to share. This is a funny story from the book. Another memorable moment from that album. It's when they're tracking the bass guitar for "Feed Me with Your Kiss." Shields,
right.
he made the bass so heavy that the speaker popped off the wall. Instinctively, the engineer put his foot out to break its fall, breaking his ankle in the process. It's a dangerous profession working with Kevin Shields.
And he wears the engineers out, and Colm was his friend, drummer. Colm was mainly the engineer. He worked with was the one he wanted to work with. And the engineers who came with the studio, he'd say, "You can leave. It's okay. We don't need you." And they would try to tell him how to record. And they say, you can't do that. You can't go above 4 hertz or whatever. And, and sometimes the person who owned the studio was also the engineer. So they'd try to cover up things that weren't working right and all kinds of problems. And he just knew what he was doing. By 88, he understood the studio. So he really has a good sense of rhythm. It's very American compared to like the British bands around that time. It's much more American, much more like Sonic Youth or Dinosaur Jr., really dynamic. So he's a really good bass player. He plays bass, even though they have different sound. They have a great sound live, and Deb Googe plays bass live, and Colm plays drums live, and they have a great sound. But he plays the bass in the studio just because it's faster, and he's a great player, and he just wants to play. It take forever to teach her the lines and have a different feel. So he plays the bass, and he's really good. And so all these songs, he's thinking about the rhythm, and then he's thinking about, not only what you hear, but what you want to feel in your body. So, it's very like, he's very in tune with dance music and hip hop and all that stuff. So he really influenced all these bands to have much more bass and drum presence. He never neglected that. So there's always something funky going on or something heavy, or some of the stuff. If you move their Kiss on, it's like almost like a hardcore variation of some sort from some American band, like a Keith Moon thing with these abrupt cyclonic drum fills, and it just stops and starts. And
what about the way he was, or he still does, blurs boundaries with music, male, female, loud, soft, east, west, mind, body. Talk about some of the ways he did that, both lyrically and sonically, like with the combination of voices too. You're not sure if it's his, Belinda's, both.
Yeah, I mean, the voices are instead of using like artificial double tracking, which a lot of people do, it creates a second vocal for you that's slightly off, so it sounds like a second vocal. For the Loveless album, they laid down like 12 to 20 vocals, and it has a weird phasing effect. And so that was like another thing he just did that was just different and sounds interesting and utterly unique, and he just thought of that on his own. And, he just doesn't do anything. He does everything for a reason and exploits the studio. And he's just exploring it as if like the Beatles would, or Pink Floyd, or Hendrix. I mean, those are really the people he's looking at for like, I'm going to look down each avenue and figure out what I can do here. And he's not, but the one thing is he takes a long time because everything has to be set up right, and he has to be in the right state of mind. So there was a lot of stress and a lot of problems because it took so long to complete the second album, Loveless. And Creation was not a secure company, a very small indie company. They would later sell to Sony for millions of dollars. But they would get an input from Sony and sell half in like 92. But this was before that. and then and so they had to struggle finishing their second album. It took like 2 years or something. He said it was 2 months of work over 2 years.
Wow.
Some days he just wouldn't feel like recording, but the studio was booked, so he'd go there and hang out, and it was such a different world there. There was a whole squatting scene, and they lived on the Dole, and it's just a totally different world. All of these bands, Blur, Jesus and Mary Jane, Pulp, they lived on the Dole and squatted and did their art and developed, and we have nothing like that in America.
No.
You know, Kurt Cobain had his girlfriend working for him while working at a job supporting him while he was developing that band, you know?
Let's get into Loveless a little bit more. Andrew Pear, he's the author of Turn My Head into Sound, A History of Kevin Shields and My Bloody Valentine. 1991's Loveless. We mentioned it's heralded as maybe the greatest album of the 90s. It's a masterpiece, yet nobody was having a good time making it. Talk about the problems within the band and then the professional and the personal obstacles they had to overcome.
By this point, when they were starting to record it, before they even started record it, Creation, which is a pretty small label, changed distributors, and that put them in the red all of a sudden. I don't know how that works exactly, but they changed from Rough Trade to Pinnacle, and so the company was already in the red. And so they're trying to make this great album, and they're real ambitious, and they're deciding they're not just going to settle anymore. And he wants to make a great album, and he's going to make it sounds like an expensive album. And it took a long time because he wants everything to work right, even though they're going into these mid-range studios. So I get to a studio, and he ended up using 19 studios to record this album over 2 years. If you count everything, all the time from after their last album till the second album, it's almost like 3 years or something. They had 2 abandoned EPs because they didn't feel like they were making progress. So in 1989, they weren't feeling like advancing. In 1989, they released nothing, but they experimented with sampling, and he started to play. They sampled guitar a lot, and he came back with this. The EP next came out was Glider, and that had a big hit on it called Soon. It was a dance song, and it wasn't like a dance song you'd heard before. It's very vague, and it's ambient kind of. And Brian Eno was a huge fan of it, and so these 2 EPs are like the singles for the album Loveless, but they're proper EPs. They're 4-song EPs that are, they're not just random B-sides. They're thought out EPs of 4 songs each. Actually, one has interstitial tracks. So one's called Glider, and that was like the EPs tell their story, how they changed, and then they kind of consolidate on the album. So while they're making Loveless, they stop and make these 2 EPs, and the kind of, I don't know, experiment and side things, and Glider comes out, and that's probably the best time ever, because Soon was a really big hit and was really celebrated, and they had a video for it that was really good and distinguished them. No one had laid guitars over drums over a beat like this, and it's just an utterly unique track. It doesn't sound like anything else. And then they did the Tremolo EP, which was hard to hear at first. And this is kind of interesting, is that Shields, he went and listened to every tape they sent out, promotional tape for the Tremolo EP, because he wanted to make sure they were done correctly. And because people did call in and said, my tape is warped, and it was mixed differently than what they were used to. And even the head of the label was like, Kevin, my tape is warped. There's nothing wrong with it. And he's like, no, it's fine. And he's like, no, I'm sure it's warped. He's like, no. And he's like, Kevin's like, I can't deal with this. And so he checked every single tape they sent out to promotional. And that's where the videos come in. They kind of give you visual cues as to what's going on. They made some videos in 90 and 91 for 2 of the songs on Loveless and 2 songs from the EPs. And they're important visual cues for needed to follow the sounds. Kind of, they're not mixed in. He doesn't just put the vocal out front or the guitar out front. He makes you take in the whole track. So he's not going to make things simple for you in a way, but it's much more of a blended, like a painting or something. He's not separating everything out.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because when I listen to the music, especially on Loveless, I'm thinking maybe there's something wrong with the person who uploaded it to YouTube, because it's like, I think it's all in mono. You know where I'm going with this, right? And that's what he wanted. He wanted most of it to be in mono. What did he say about that?
Yeah, he likes very he's kind of, he doesn't really think of stereo much. He thinks we have 2 mono ears. That's one of his quotes. And he thinks it's really weak to pan the guitars, and almost every track on Loveless is just one guitar. Even though it's a massive sound, it's done really dry up front. There's one song with 7 acoustic guitars panned across, but other than that, most every song is one main guitar sound, and then there's maybe a second guitar to fill in a little things. But like there's one guitar that's really crazy or something.
He's using 2 different amps facing each other with a mic between. For
one of the songs, Only Shallow, what he did was he dropped a mic in between 2 amps. And there's a video for this that works really well for Only Shallow. It's worth seeing because it helps you follow along. And it has 2 different tremolo rates on the speakers for the mic. So you're getting the strange sound for the chorus, and then you put it into a sampler and he flips it over and he does some other things with it. And then the verses are more straightforward, and that's just kind of a thing. And then when you hear the chorus, it just goes into this. It's just a really crazy sound.
It's like a swell.
Yeah,
I can't decipher where's the guitar and is there some keys in there or synths? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's no. That's all guitar.
All guitar.
That's all guitar. Yeah, that's all guitar. And when they play it live, they might use a couple sequence parts, but that's all one guitar part. I mean, he might have like he might have done it twice, like used it twice or something. But it's fundamentally one guitar performance. Okay, you play the guitar one time, and he mic'd it over 4. He mic'd it on 4 amps. And so you get weird phasing stuff, and then he has the tremolo arm in his hand, and so you've got all the strings going slightly differently, the way they change, and he's making a physical motion. So you're getting this strange warped sound. Instead of warping, things like I said, like individual strings, he's using the thing to warp chords, and the whole song is warped. And so, and same with one of the other videos, To Hear Knows When, which was the lead-off track on tremolo. And the whole thing just sounds, so people thought my tape is messed up. It just sounds warped, the whole thing. It's hard to get to find your way at something at first. He doesn't mix the way you're used to. But once you get your bearings, he knows exactly what he's doing. And once you get the melody, hear the melody and hear it properly, there's a reason he has an obsessive following, and all these engineers and all these people think he's so talented because they hear what he's doing.
I would love to hear the isolated tracks. Then again,
yeah,
how much of this is just him recording all on one track at the same time, or is it several tracks separately put together?
I mean, there's To Hear Knows When has a lot of synths in it and stuff, little synth parts, but the guitar is one part, and you can't tell where its point of origin is.
So you can't split it up. You can't find the.
You can't find the point of attack or anything. Okay. It's very strange, and but it's a guitar, and
I love this stuff. This stuff is fascinating.
So the videos are help with that, but you want to also hear it on a proper stereo too. But it'll help lead you in. You'll hear the melody and everything, and you just hear it a couple times to get oriented with this later stuff from like 1990 on, and then so the album came out. That Loveless album finally came out the same week as Nirvana's Nevermind, and they had put out, let's see, 4 EPs and 2 albums on Creation, and they had taken so long, and they weren't worth the hassle to them anymore. They weren't going to make back their money. They weren't going to right away. And it was just a headache for the people at the label, Alan McGee in particular, and Dick. There's 2 main people at the small label Creation that would become huge. They signed Oasis eventually, and because Alan McGee is a great A&R man. I mean, it's the reason he found My Bloody Valentine and Jesus and Mary Jane and who else? A couple other well-known British bands. I don't know if American bands are so familiar with. Oasis never broke that big here, but they're they've sold millions and millions of records in the UK and a decent amount here. So Sony eventually bought the company for $33 million or something in the end. But so they were dropped by Creation after Loveless was finished. But they could have dropped them before that and not let them finish the album. The 2 owners mortgaged their houses to keep the label afloat for a while. And there's a movie about by the same people who made Trainspotting called Creation Stories about the journey of the label. And they were at some point they were thinking of just stopping Kevin, just dropping him and cutting him off, and Loveless wouldn't have been finished. But they saw it through because the label started to make good music, but they dropped him after it was done. And then the band went on tour. And then, actually, after they got dropped, when Kevin Shields woke up the next day, 10 labels called wanting to sign him. And by the end of 92, the same year he got dropped, he had a huge deal with Island.
We were thinking we're going to get another album quickly, but not the case, right? What led to their breakup?
No one knew the contours of this part of what happened to Island until now, I don't think, because I did an interview with the people at Island. Mark Moreau was handpicked. Chris Blackwell founded Island. He's the one who made reggae music what we know it today. He signed Bob Marley. He's this very interesting background. Chris Blackwell, and read his biography. Island started from nothing, and one of the huge labels like Warner or Atlantic or whatever. And he did Bob Marley and U2 and a million other bands, And Chris Blackwell personally, as it became less personal, the music in 1990, Chris Blackwell chose Mark Moreau, who had a great 10-year run. He signed PJ Harvey, Tricky, Stereo MCs, the Cranberries, people know in America. He had a great run. The only thing that didn't work out so well was Kevin Shields. And they gave him a lot of time, a lot of money, and they eventually cut him off. They signed him from 92 to 97, and they cut him off in 97's money. But he was still under contract till the end of 2001, I think. They finally let him go. They didn't have to. And then he was kind of in a bad place for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, there were stories that he had become a recluse, that he had a meltdown. What did happen to him after he parted ways with Island Records? And then how was he able to get back on his feet thanks to, is it a book called Hypnagogia?
Hypnagogia, yeah. He has a
Hypnagogia.
It's a real Hypnagogia, yeah. He has it's a state we go through when we go from being awake to going to sleep. We all go through it. And So there's one book in English about it, and he found that and helped him with his sanity. And if you go on the internet right now and look up hypnagogic or hypnagogia or whatever, you'll see a million studies on it, MIT or anywhere. It's a very creative state. When you're aroused from that state, people make different connections and you're not thinking linearly. And it goes back to like the writer Coleridge, or Kubla Khan, Tesla, Edison. All these people knew how to harness this, and they would wake themselves up as they were falling asleep. They all had different techniques for rousing themselves while they were falling asleep. And Dolly's another one. So this is a known technique for being creative. And Shields, when he would record,
so you find a way to do that, and then once you're up, there's a short period of time where you want to make sure you.
It's more. He's a little different. That's the history of it. He kind of like, I think he can kind of just bring it on. Like first, they would stay up for 23 hours and wait till they got to that state. They would kind of get into a fugue weird state by just staying up for a really long time.
Right.
And then they would sleep for an hour and then keep recording another day and then sleep for an hour or two. And so they would stay in this fugue state, weird state. And that's so they would do a lot of stuff.
And let the tape roll and see what comes out.
Yeah. And I mean, there were shorter periods early on, and then, there's no one thing that's happening at one time, but he definitely can bring it on to some degree. And if you hear music in that state, it's a very different than hearing it like on marijuana. It's even more immersive and interesting, and it really it's a very you really hear the whole thing, the whole sound of music beautifully. If you're in the right state and you listen to stuff as you're falling asleep, if you can catch yourself at the right moment and stay awake, you'll hear things differently without you'll take everything in without drugs or anything. So he compares it to pot, but he says he likes it better. But it kind of got away from him because he could kind of induce it well, and he was smoking a lot of pot. And I think he went to a bad place.
Was he a recluse? Did he have a meltdown? What happened to him? So
like two of the band members left in 95 because they'd been signed to Island for like since the end of 92 and tried to build their own studio, and that had taken a long time. They lost momentum and they weren't really he wanted to do this drum and bass project, layering guitars over drum and bass, but it's more oblique than that. He doesn't just layer things over. It has to be, something sophisticated and inspired. The song "Soon" is a good example of how he did a house rhythm sort of with guitars, but it's inspired and unique. And so they were trying to do this project with drum and bass, and it had all these problems with the studio and then his mental health. And two of the members left in 95. In 97, he still hadn't given them anything, even though he'd recorded maybe a couple albums. He wasn't sure about if it was good or not, or if he liked it, and he didn't think it was hold up. And they cut him off in 97, and he was still under contract, and and then the final member, Belinda, left. And he thinks of her as like...
They were a couple, right? They were
a couple this whole 10 years, from late 87 to 97. And he considers her, and it truly tracks their relationship, these albums, which makes them really interesting too. There's really a lot of intimacy and emotions and love lists about, things you can't really express, different feelings you have that you can't say in words, and, about, regrets and recriminations and love and just all different human expressions that you can't just say in simple words. So music is a good place for them, and it charts their relationship. Everything from like 88 to 97, and so in 97, Island cuts them off. They do some other recording in 97 but that doesn't come out until 2013. But that does end that 10-year period. So nothing comes out in 97. He doesn't give him, I think he was out on 2 songs. They give him about $1 million, maybe in today's money, over the 4 or 5 years they had him signed. And because they really understood how talented he was, but it was just the worst time in his life. So he got by doing remixes, and he joined another band, Primal Scream, as a kind of member. And he got money from publishing, and so he didn't have trouble getting by or anything, but he wasn't making his own music. And he started to get rehabilitated around 2 people came into his life. One guy's Brian Reitzel, who did Sofia Coppola's soundtracks. And he was brought in early for the movie Lost in Translation, which she got an Academy Award for that, for the screenplay. He was brought in before they shot anything to get ideas and to, they usually don't bring in the soundtrack people until after the movie's shot, see how much budget is left over. He was brought on before anything was shot. And so he's played a significant role in that movie and its vibe. And he has 4 original things on that, 4 original new songs on the soundtrack. And Brian Reitzel had all this patience to make 3 trips to England to hang out in the studio with him. Nothing happened until like the 3rd trip. One night, Kevin Childs spent 8 hours equalizing his guitar one day. Brian Reitzel gives an example, 8 hours, and he'd have to go there for a week at a time, and Kevin Childs would have him smoke pot, so they'd be in the same place, and Kevin Childs smoking a lot of pot then, so they start at night usually, and then they finish in the morning. But nothing had been done the first 2 or 3 visits. And one of the last visits, it's early in the morning and the day is supposed to be over. And Shields is like, okay, Brian, get behind the drums. I'm ready. And he just starts playing the song. And Brian Reitzel plays along. And that first take is what is on the soundtrack called City Girl. And that's played at the end of the movie. And 3 other really delicate pieces are part of that, but it just all of a sudden came together. That's what happens with him. Everything has to align right, and so Reitzel was just shocked. Just all of a sudden, he says, Shield just tells him get behind the drum thing, and he just has to start playing. And this whole time, he's not pressuring Kevin. He's telling him you don't have to deal with anyone but me and Sofia Coppola. We'll just see what happens. Because they really respect him and just want him. They want to both rehabilitate him and they would like some music for the movie. But Brian Reitzel has a personal stake in this, and people told him you're not going to get any music out of him. It's been since like '92 since he put out any music, but he ends up getting like 5. He gets 4 new songs, and there's 3 others recorded that haven't been released. So that helped get him back on track. And then he does another project with Patti Smith, who never meets him, but just talks to him once. And she heard the album Loveless, and she just thought, I have something in common with this guy. And they do these shows. It's her reading her poem about her friend and photographer, what's his name? Mapplethorpe. That was Robert Mapplethorpe was a good friend of hers, and she wrote a poem about him. And Shields is like, it's just her and Shields, and he's on a sofa in back of her playing the guitar, doing improvising behind her. And that was recorded twice, and that helped inspire him. And then that was in 2005. In 2006, he was also playing with the band Primal Scream. He stops everything else and he turns his attention back to My Bloody Valentine. And there's also getting offers now by 2007 to play live, because the albums are reverberated throughout the community. And they get $1 million offer to play Coachella, 2008, but they're not ready. But these people are ready to give them money to buy equipment. The guy who runs this festival called All Tomorrow's Parties, which was a really good festival, was really curated really well, like a mixtape or something of just the best band you could want. it wasn't completely sustainable because it wasn't always the most popular bands. It was really good bands. And this guy who started all Tomorrow's Parties, he gets killed about $600,000, something like that, to get all the equipment they need to really pull off the songs correctly. He wasn't always happy with the last tour in '92. They didn't have the right equipment to do everything right. So now they do a reunion tour in 2008, 2009. They remaster everything for CD and do a really good job of that. And they finally put some stuff they recorded, all the stuff they recorded in '96, '97. He finally he had recorded bits and pieces, and he puts that together and puts out a new album in 2013. It's been 21 years since their last album. So people were waiting. He kept saying, oh yeah, an album's coming. He was saying it was 96, 97, 98, 99. 2013, he finally releases it. And people are pissed off and just like, why are you taking so long? But he had gone through real problems, and, nothing like this ever happened again.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. You said that the book Hypnagogia helped him get back on his feet. So was that just like it helped him to understand?
He had to go through this process to understand what his reality was. And he talks about, he'd have these strange experiences and he couldn't tell. They seemed so real, but they weren't, and he couldn't always tell. And the book kind of talks about different kinds of sleep and different states, and
give him a better understanding of himself, get some control over what he's thinking. And
I think he had to go through this certain process of like Leonard Cohen went and lived on a Buddhist monastery for like 4 or 5 years. And he had to go through something like that to like understand his reality and figure things out. And
they've been pretty busy ever since, he and the band, right?
Everything's been good since then. Since he got these two people did play a key role. I think Brian Reitzel should take the most credit, and Patti Smith also. They both got him back on track, and I think gave him confidence. And I don't think he was I think it was a really bad place. I mean, for a couple of years there. I mean, even though he wasn't broke or anything, he wasn't making his music. He did a lot of he ended up doing interesting stuff. The remixes he did. He did work with a whole bunch of different people in different collaborations, and that makes up a bunch of. You can make a bunch of CDs out of that, which I document in the book and everything on my website, and I'll have more stuff up soon, and just stuff only he could have done, remixes of bands like Yo La Tango or Curve. Who else? Just all this interesting stuff. Lost in Translation stuff's really beautiful. It just doesn't sound like anything else, but he wants to make his personal music, the My Bloody Valentine music. So they tour 2008, 2009. They're totally independent now. They pay back the money that was loaned to them. And 2013, they released the album themselves. Their third album, and they're good monetarily. Then he spends a bunch of money remastering the first 2 albums to make them pure analog, because he didn't know enough about the process. And it's not just analog like you see from some of these record companies like, I don't know, that sell these expensive remasters. Acoustic Sounds maybe is one of them. They say they take the analog tape, but it's not the same because they use digital equipment to master it. he made the albums as if it were 1975. He remastered them. So you get these transients on your body, and they just have a different feel to them. And you can get them directly from the band. The cheapest one to get that the band sells or Domino sells is the best one to get. It's fully analog, not AAA, which is the thing you used to see on things, or ADA, that code you used to see. It's like fully analog, as in like as if it was before digital existed, and they sound beautiful. And he did that by 2018. That came out, and then since then he's just saying, I have to put out these final albums to kind of seal our thing. And so he says he's going to put out at least 2 albums and some EPs, and he keeps making it grow and grow. And so they've put 6 shows they have, and then that are at the end of this year. And then there's 1 show now at the end of 2026, and I'm thinking they're going to fill in all those dates over this next year, touring the world.
Wow. Okay. Because I'm looking at the website here. Yeah, they got the Dublin. Well, here's what they have. November 22nd, Dublin. That's sold out.
Mm-hmm.
November 24th, Manchester, sold out. November 25th, Ovo Arena in Wembley, London. November 27th, Ovo Hydro, Glasgow. February 3rd, they're in Osaka, so they're going to do some shows in Japan. February 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 9th, all in Tokyo. Or no, I'm sorry, in Osaka and Tokyo. But they don't have another show listed there, but you said there's another one.
They do have, yeah, they do. I definitely have one more. It's in Spain, maybe, or something. I can't remember. I'm positive. There's another show now at the end of 2026. It's not a rumor. It's listed somewhere. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It happened a couple of weeks ago. So the idea is, and they have a really great show now. Everything's dialed in on a light show, and it sounds amazing. If you saw them in '92, it's nothing like that. It's much more. They have so much more control, and they need that. And they make he thinks of sound in this profound way, and so the shows are this unique thing to him. And he used to end it with a song that was like 40 minutes long in 1992 and 2008, and they would do this one song for 40 minutes of this noise thing, and to get people to kind of understand music and sound better. And I don't know if they do that as long now, but he really takes it seriously, the live show and the sound. He really wants to present the sounds well, and he can, because they come from his playing guitar, how he physically plays the guitar through, there's nothing, most of the stuff can be reproduced live, the vast majority of the stuff. So not exactly the same, but pretty similar.
Yeah, if somebody wants to listen to their music, and particularly Loveless, and the album that came before Loveless, Isn't Anything, they are not on streaming services. And I'm just looking here because I was telling you this just before we started recording, and it appears as if there's some kind of an issue that the band pulled it, or Kevin himself.
Do you see the 2013 MBV album? It's a blue album.
It is. The blue album is there, and you can stream that.
Okay, that's a really mellow album. A good way to get into them, to hear them. Actually,
but you could get Isn't Anything and Loveless are on YouTube if you need. You could obviously support the band and go out and buy the album, the CD, what have you. But there seems to be some kind of contractual issue going on right now.
I wonder if I wonder what that's about.
It's too bad. Hopefully it'll go back up there, because Loveless is just an absolutely phenomenal piece of work, and I can't.
Yeah, you really can get. I mean, if you end up liking the blue album, it's just called MBV.
Right. Lowercase.
If you like, the first 8 songs are really pretty, and then he gets into some more dynamic stuff the last 2 songs, and the more you learn about them, the more interesting they are. And the more you read about them and can have some context on them, even I had trouble with the very last song until my friend explained it to me a little more and showed me where the melody was and what they were doing. And a musician friend of mine, he showed me where the melody was and everything and oriented me. And so I like that song now a lot. And but the first 8 songs are really great on that, really pretty stuff. And that's as good as anything to hear about them. Some of them from the subtle things they're doing.
Hey guys, we'll get back to the show, but first I want to tell you about an exclusive deal for Booked on Rock listeners. Get 15% off any purchase at oldglory.com. Over 300,000 officially licensed items covering music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture. Merchandise featuring legendary music artists like Bob Marley, The Beatles, Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and many, many more. Go to oldglory.com. Make sure to use the promo code BookedOnRock. Also find a link in this episode's show notes, or just go to bookedonrock.com and click on My Deals. Well, you did a fantastic job with the book, Andrew.
Thanks.
Talking to somebody who was not familiar with the band. So being able to read the book helped me understand Kevin Shields, the band, and then listening to the music after reading the book, it really gave it a whole new perspective. So when I'm listening to it, I'm thinking about all these stories from the book and his approach and just the way his mind works. To me, it's just an absolutely fascinating story. Turn My Head into Sound, A History of Kevin Shields and My Bloody Valentine. And it is out now, right? People can get the book.
In the UK, it's out now. I think the electronic version is out the 16th.
Let's see.
And December 2nd, the physical book will be in America, but on the 16th of this month, October, it'll be in the UK. And for some reason, they had to put it December 2nd, the physical book in America.
Okay.
So you can get the electronic version in a couple of days on the 16th.
Through Jawbone Press.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good press.
Okay.
Good book.
So look for it. You could check online, but you can also you mentioned your website. So where can people go to check out more about you, Andrew, and the band?
There's going to be a lot more stuff on there's some history and stuff online, and just describe the book that it's a narrative book. It's not a collection of quotes or anything. There'll be more from my website soon. It's called turnmyheadintosound.com.
Okay.
And that there's a discography and a chronological thing there that'll give you some context for the band and when things came out, and that helps explain what's going on and when things came out. That'll give you an outline of things, both for albums, all the releases and what happened, a timeline. So that's up now, and there'll be more stuff up later, within a couple of days, hopefully. So that's a good way to see what came out when.
Turnmyheadintosound.com. I'll put the link up in the show notes. People can just click on the link and go right there. So Andrew Pear, thanks so much, man. This was great. This is one of the most fascinating stories that I've read. I've read a lot of books, so this was a great.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I had 2 really good editors, so I was lucky. And I like your show. I'm glad you cover all these books on these artists. I was listening to the Lennon thing, a woman who writes the really intense Lennon books. And why you take deep dives on stuff. It's really cool. Really great.
Got to do the deep dive, especially with these types of books. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it. It's in the books.